So the question is, but is it even possible? So at this point, some readers or listeners may be thinking along the lines, well, that's all very interesting again, but it's really besides the point. There's a fundamental problem here. It's just not logical. It's illogical and impossible for God to become human. Right. And we definitely see this from the Muslim opponents as well.
Right. And so Anderson says, well, okay, let me concede right away that this is a genuine concern which shouldn't be casually dismissed, right? Is it even possible? He says, yet it's also one that Christianity has acknowledged from the outset, right? Christian
We're not
theologians,
hiding the fact.
that's right. Christian theologians have long maintained that the doctrine of the incarnation, that is, God becoming man, incarnation, right? Like the doctrine of the Trinity, is a very mysterious and paradoxical type of teaching. And he says that's not a concession that he's giving, right? That these doctrines are nonsensical or that they're contrary to reason, but rather it's an admission that these teachings, which come directly from the Bible, can only be partially understood by human reason. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what he's trying to get at here.
Right. That being said, we can go some way towards showing that it isn't inherently unreasonable to believe that God can and did take on a human nature. In the first place, we need to be clear that Christianity doesn't teach that Jesus changed from one kind of being, a divine being, into another kind of being, a human being.
Right, and so this is what we saw in Paul's testimony in Philippians chapter 2, right? Yeah. He had the very nature of God, and he took on the very nature of humanity. So he had both the divine nature and the human nature. He didn't, change into something else. It was not God changing into a man, and therefore now he's a man.
Right.
No, he was still God. Right.
And he didn't cease to be the Son of God when he became a man. God can't stop being God. And you see this for when he knows certain events that would take place in other areas of what those events would be. He knows when people are thinking things. He knows what to do. There's all these evidences that Jesus experiences within his life that points to a omni type being kind of within himself. That's not too blasphemous to say. Christians do believe, however, that the God the Son, the second person of the Trinity, added a human nature to his divine nature, precisely so that he could suffer and die as a human death in our place. And so obviously not all similes and metaphors are perfect, but I almost view it as kind of like putting on a trench coat. God puts on a trench coat. It doesn't change his nature underneath the trench coat. He's just has put on a trench coat. And there's nothing contradictory to that. He can add to himself a human form and still maintain his godhood.
Or a human nature even.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the question that has to arise is, okay, if you believe in some transcendent God, as the Muslims do, you're saying it is impossible for your God to be able to do that. And so you just have to come to grips with that understanding of kind of a lower view of transcendence, I guess, in that regard.
And he tells us, admittedly, it's very hard for us to understand how God could do that, right?
I mean, those categories are just outside of ourselves. And
the mere fact that we don't know, though, he says, how something could happen.
How did God make the universe?
Yeah, that doesn't mean that, it didn't happen or it couldn't happen, right? Just because we don't know.
Right.
That's kind of the argument from ignorance, I think, right?
Right.
We don't know what it is, and we don't know how it happened, and therefore it didn't happen.
Right.
No. That's no reason to believe that it didn't happen. He says, imagine an Aborigine in the remote Australian outback who has never encountered modern electronic communication devices. You tell him that you have a little box which you can speak into, and tens of thousands of miles away, someone with another little box can hear you and speak back to you. Well, he doesn't have the first idea how that's even possible. In fact, he might think you're crazy. Right? But of course, that's no good reason to think that it isn't possible. I was surfing the channels the other day, and I came across this channel where they were showing tribal people, is what it said, various things, and they showed a clip from Michael Jackson dancing in and doing the moonwalk, right? And I mean, but they showed doing the moonwalk, doing dancing and that sort of thing when he was singing Billie Jean, which is, one of his favorites. And they were and one guy said, he looks like he's made out of rubber.
We think the same thing, too.
Yeah. So, just because, we don't think it's possible don't know whether or not it's possible or are not sure whether it could happen doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Right.
That's the point. Right?
So the mysteriousness of the Christian doctrine of the incarnation shouldn't be seen as a reason not to believe. In fact, Dr. Anderson says here, I would suggest that the opposite is true. If a transcendent God were to take on a human nature, wouldn't we expect that to be mysterious at some level? Yeah, wouldn't you want kind of an outlandish type claim to happen, but still fall within the nature aspect of who God is, Well, can God make a circle square? Well, no, that would be against his nature. But this isn't against his nature. This is just something that is, like you said, paradoxical in regard.
It's hard for us to conceive of it,
right?
But we can conceive of it, right? We can't conceive of a square circle,
right?
That's inconceivable. It's impossible. But this, we can conceive of God becoming a man, right? And
So he says, wouldn't we expect it to go beyond what our limited minds can comprehend there, right? Yeah. Do you want to hold every aspect of this, all powerful God who has the ability to pay for your sins, to make you whole, to have created you, to have created everything in the universe? Do you want to be able to understand all things about him? If you did, wouldn't that kind of point you to the fact that might not be the case? There might be, if you can kind of hold on to it all. I totally
understand God and everything that he's done. Really?
Right. Do you really want that to happen?
Yeah, good. And so he kind of ends this chapter here with the promise that he's going to get into the resurrection for the next chapter, right?
Again, I like talking about the importance of Jesus. When we talk about why should we believe Christianity is true, we should talk about Jesus. We should even more so talk about the resurrection.
Yeah.